let's jump in here and jump over to Erin Eldridge and her crossing. I am going to be calling her out on all of her lies. We're going to go about an hour here on this, and then we're going to jump back over. There may be some of it that's kind of unbearable. I apologize, but I'm going to do my best to keep it popping. Here we go. We're starting with Judge Bommie, and then it'll go to Erin.
Second judgments in circumstances that are tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving about the amount of force that
the jury.
Here we go. All right.
The
So
defendant told you
of course we start out the closing. We start at the closing and we got Erin Eldridge, the harpy, right? I call her the harpy, right? She's starting out with these photos. And now the state, when they got up in their rebuttal, they talked about how irrelevant the stuff that the defense talked about was. Well, Earl Grey got up and immediately said, look, this shit's irrelevant. This fucking shit is irrelevant. This is irrelevant. It doesn't matter if Dante Wright took a cute photo with his kid or that he had one of his homeboys. Oh, man, look at him. He looks cool with his homeboy there. He looks, man, this guy with his homeboy is just chilling, bruh. Like, okay, like that doesn't mean he can't be a criminal. Criminals sometimes take good photos, you know? Al Capone cleaned up every once in a while. You know, he went down to one of my favorite spots in Miami, Joe's Stone Crabs. And by all accounts, if you read what they say, they even put it in the menu. He was a gentleman. He tipped well, right? He did well. But was he killing motherfuckers? Yes. You know, that's Al Capone, right? You know, these criminals can, you know, have two faces, right? Many people can have two faces, right? Pablo Escobar donated a lot to the community. Right? If you saw Narcos, right? You know, he was a good guy, donated to the community, but at the same time, he was killing people. He was ruthless. So, you know, you've got people that can play both faces. You can put on a good day for the first birthday, right? That's your kid, right? You're smiling there, you're yamming it up. But then you're also a drug dealer. You also have a restraining order. You're also a criminal who's out on a warrant, right? So where's that information? You know, where are you putting that up? Is that in the next slide? It's not, right? Let's continue.
her sons will be home for the holidays. But you know who won't be home for the holidays is Dante Wright.
That's like, so, and like, by the way, this woman, there's something, I don't know if you guys, the vocal fry, the crispiness in her voice, you know, it sounds like a McDonald's chicken nugget that's been over fried, right? That is one of the most grating effects. And look, I understand people's voices are their voice. I mean, you can try to change it. You can take voice acting lessons and try to lower your resonance and come off a little more smooth like butter. But even if you do that, there's only so much you can do. And I understand that. But if you have a grating voice, you should not do the closing. Just don't do it. Even Frank's, who is, you know, unethical. He lied about the law. He's horrible. At least he had a tone which wasn't offensive. It was like neutral. I called it on Ricada's stream oatmeal, right? You don't really love it. You don't hate it. You just eat it, right? It's an oatmeal. It's cold. It's lumpy, you know. It's like, oh, it's oatmeal, but I got to eat it. I need my fiber, right? You just got to get through it. You know, you got to get something in you and then get out the door, right? That's oatmeal. That's Frank's. She wasn't oatmeal. She was nails on a chalkboard, right? I mean, she was like, you know, taking a serrano pepper, you know, intravenously. I mean, it was just not pleasant, right? You know, just not pleasant at all. So let's continue.
Dante Wright's parents, Katie and Aubrey Wright, will have an empty seat at their table.
Look at Earl Grey, by the way. He shook his head because he's like, this shit is irrelevant. He's like, why the fuck are they bringing this up?
This holiday season, because the defendant shot and killed him on April 11th of this year.
Or because he decided to be a criminal and flee from the police. How about that? You know, because he fled from the police.
He was just 20 years old. He had a baby boy of his own.
That's irrelevant to whether whether there was a crime committed.
Today.
No, it's not. The baby boy is totally fucking irrelevant to the crime. That's why we're here today. Once again, when they've got no cards, they play with your emotions, right? They play with your emotions.
We're here because the defendant, Kimberly Potter, a 26-year veteran of the Brooklyn Center Police Department, pulled the wrong weapon.
Okay, so here's the thing. We talked about this on stream, but it's sort of a damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario. So if she was a rookie, they would have been like, oh, well, this inexperienced rookie, rah, rah, right? They would have cried about that, right? But in this case, they're giving her shit because she's been there for a long time. She should have known better, right? So either way, you're fucked, by the way. This is a template for how prosecutors are going to execute any single law enforcement agent. And law enforcement agents should pay attention. Get the hell out of Minnesota if you're still there. I'm sorry. I mean, unless you've got a damn good reason to be there, get out of Minnesota. And if you're law enforcement and you can't leave the state, change your job. These people don't respect you. They don't want you. They're not going to protect you. Even when you make a mistake, an honest mistake, they are trying to criminalize mistakes. But let me continue. Let me let this play.
And she shot and killed Daunte Wright. And at the heart of it, this case is very simple, members of the jury.
Her face, her facial expressions, like every time she makes them. And once again, maybe it's the voice, maybe it's the skeletalness of it, but it's just it's infuriating because you can tell she's coming at it from a standpoint that is so inhuman.
It's a case about the defendant's reckless handling of her firearm, and it's about her culpable negligence. It's about what she did on April 11th. She drew a deadly weapon.
Okay, so here's the issue. The state, and they do this throughout, they literally try to make the drawing of a weapon, she just said it there. That's not me putting words in her mouth. The drawing of the weapon is the conscious act that you need to be punishable under the law. So anybody in the state, because remember, this case law doesn't just apply to officers, it'll apply to regular people too. The drawing of a weapon will be grounds for manslaughter if she's guilty here. The drawing of a weapon, right? Insane. It's an insane standard. It obliterates self-defense, right? Because it's like, oh, you drew the weapon. That was per se reckless, right? You should never just drawn the weapon. Just don't do it ever, right? It's really a scary line. Let's go.
She aimed it.
Aim is a loose word, right? It's like, did she have a red dot on him? Like was she, what was she doing? Like lining up the shot? Did she take a knee? She, getting a stance? Not really. If you look at what she did, she's kind of just holding her arm out towards him. It's not even particularly good form in terms of shooting form, right? It's not even particularly good form. So, I don't know what you're saying about aim, but these words are being used by somebody who clearly, by the way, Erin, has never fired a weapon in her life, right? She thinks they're big, scary things that only crazy conservatives use, right? That's Erin.
Pointed it at Daunte Wright's chest, and she fired. Now, the defense will tell you that Daunte Wright is somehow to blame in causing his own death.
These zoom outs are so freaking random. Like I don't know why, but they're completely random.
But make no mistake, we're here because of the defendant's actions, not Daunte Wright's.
But for Daunte Wright's actions, we wouldn't be here today. So let's just be clear about that, though. Like if he hadn't resisted the police, he would still be alive. Let's be very clear about that.
She knew she had a loaded gun on her duty belt, a gun that...
No shit. Every cop's gun is loaded, right? It's like, what? Do you want cops to carry unloaded guns? Do you want them to not carry guns? Are we in the UK? I know my UK people, don't kill me. I know cops in the UK, there's some that carry guns. I know in Northern Ireland, people told me they carry guns, right? There's special firearm police in the UK. I get it, right? Maybe, we'll use another country, like, for example, Japan or somewhere else, where they don't normally carry guns. But in the UK, there's a lot of cops without guns. You get what I'm saying, right? Just give them the baton, or as Nate, the lawyer, calls it, the as baton, right? Which always sounds funny to me, but I'm immature. And some pepper spray. Like, what are we going to give them? Or just a taser, right? Good luck when you go up against the guy with an actual gun, right? Good luck.
that she carried every single day on the job. She carried it on the right side every day for 26 years. And that's the weapon she used. That's the weapon she drew. That's the weapon she pointed. And that's the weapon she fired. Members of the jury, that's culpable negligence, and that's reckless handling of a firearm, resulting in death. This case is about the defendant's rash and reckless conduct.
So she'll say these words a lot, but it's sort of like the situation or the meme where it's like, I'm not sure you know what those words mean, woman. I'm not sure you know what they mean, right? Because reckless is a legal standard. She's using it, and this is a manipulation tactic. And this is also what I see a lot of libs. And by the way, I've been getting a lot of libs sliding into the comments. Like they're getting salty because they know they're probably going to take an L here, right? But they're like, oh, it was reckless. I'm like, there's a legal definition of reckless, okay? It's different than how you might use that in what we call regular or colloquial speech. You might call somebody reckless because they spilt their orange juice, right? Or because they, I don't know, forgot to, I have no idea, bring a rubber to the Tinder date. I don't know what's going on, whatever it is, right? Oh, that's reckless, right? But that being said, it's not criminal, right? It's not criminal. Something that we would commonly refer to as reckless, right, is not criminal. And it's something that has to rise to a higher level of negligence, not ordinary negligence. We call conscious disregard. You have a risk that you know is a risk and you do it anyways. That is criminal. That's a higher level, right? It is not just something that is merely negligent. Let's be very clear about that. So whenever she says that word, understand she doesn't define it for a reason because she doesn't want the real definition to come out. She wants her version of the definition. She wants the not law to come out.
It's not about her being a nice person or a good person. Even nice people have to obey the law.
Like Dante Wright, who should have obeyed the law by, not running from the cops, like that.
It's not about the smell of marijuana. It's not about...
I would say that's pretty fucking relevant, but okay. I mean, the fact that Dante Wright was high. Yeah, people who are high do crazy shit. And, maybe police react because the guy's on drugs, I mean, once again, it's kind of relevant. And look, I know in America, pot is pretty normal, ubiquitous, right? But that doesn't mean you're not affected by it regardless, right? And maybe he's making bad decisions. And maybe that's on Dante, right?
A gross misdemeanor warrant. It's not about an order for protection. And it's certainly not about anyone being dragged.
It is because an officer could have been dragged, right? It's not about whether they were, because she's arguing about whether they were. The issue is not were. The issue is potentially from Kim Potter's standpoint, from her subjective standpoint based on an objective standard, right? An objectively reasonable person, but from her subjective point of view, right? From her perspective, yeah, it is relevant. The dragging is very relevant.
No one was dragged. No one was...
See, she says no one was dragged. See, she's ex post facto, right? She's going after the fact and saying, oh, I'm going to take this justification, right? Because we know it didn't happen. And because it didn't happen, right? Then you have no reasonable fear. That's not how that standard works, lady. Go back to law school. Go back to 101 criminal law. When me, a corporate attorney, knows that is not the law, it's really freaking embarrassing. That's why me calling her out on this, and when, the same thing for Rittenhouse, right? When I'm going off, it's like, this is a freaking problem. Because I don't even know the law as well as somebody who does criminal law day in, day out, every single day. But even I remember from law school that. I remember from the bar. I remember from my internships over the summer when I clerked doing criminal matters, right? I remember that standard. But she doesn't remember that? Come on. That is just, once again, prosecutors are supposed to have a duty of candor to the court. And at this point, this is violating that duty. You are being dishonest. Unethical.
Was almost dragged. And how do you know that? Well, you know that from what the defendant said herself on April 11th.
And by the way, I forgot, look how down here they're keeping up the Dante stuff, right? Of course they're keeping up the Dante stuff, right? They got to keep up the Dante stuff.
From her own reaction to what she had done and from what she told you in court. What this case is really about is about an officer who mishandled her firearm. That's why we're here. And even if you take the defendant's word for it, she admits that's what she did. She told you in court she knew it was wrong. And she knew from the very beginning, from the things that she said. She was no rookie. Wasn't her first day on the job. She was an FTO, a field training officer. She had 26 years of experience on the street. Every year for 26 years.
But she had never drawn her gun or that particular taser.
She was trained on how to use her gun and how to use it safely. And every year for 26 years, she was trained on use of force. And
Once again, a PowerPoint training doesn't mean you actually get to practice it and do it. This is the whole thing between school and experience. The experience is so much more valuable than going to school, right? 26 years of PowerPoint presentations doesn't mean shit, because after year one, you're tuned out, right? So, and I want to see this in the chat. Let me actually go here in the chat, because this is a big defense that everybody was pulling here, and I want to see you guys. So one's in the chat. Oh, by the way, someone says this prosecutor reminds me of my ex. Me too, bro. Me too. Because guess what? I had an ex who was a state attorney. I've talked about this before. Looks very much like this chick. Very much like this chick. Emma says she is disingenuously discounting the reasons Potter had to employ force. The reasonable offer standard is subjectively objective, and fellow officers would say they've used force. It's a gross mischaracterization. Jeremy says, would the standard change if she was a rookie? I don't imagine it would, given training is what the jury will focus on. Really, it's a reasonable officer standard. Now, it is a reasonable officer with that level of training experience, right? So with that level of training experience, what would you do, right? But that being said, she's using it as a bludgeon, right? As a bludgeon. And under those circumstances, right? Under the circumstances, I mean, that's reasonable, right? That's reasonable. And people are trolling, right? I see already people in the chat, right? People trolling, and any of the mods out there, feel free to hit that ban hammer. I'm totally fine with that. Because guess what? These people are deranged, and they're not watching the actual video, right? They're not watching the actual jury, the decision. They're not watching the actual case. They're not looking at the facts, right? And I see these people say, oh, so you're saying Dante Wright should be dead. Oh, no, I'm not. I don't think anybody wanted anybody to be dead that way, right? And let me address that very clearly, right? You know, for anybody who's out there spamming the chat, you know, number one, I'm just going to block you if you spam the chat. But number two, you know, what we're saying is that you should understand that you should not run from the police when you have a felony warrant out for your arrest and you have a restraining order, right? You know, you're out there and you're fighting with police. Don't do that. It's not smart. Everybody knows that, right? And I've had interactions with police. And by the way, I've had interactions with police. And look, I think sometimes that police are overly assholes. Sometimes I think they're a little bit too rough. They can handle it in a more civil manner. We can agree with that. We can say, okay, yeah, let's talk about that, right? Some of them are a little too cowboy. I was in North Carolina when that happened, you know, and the guy could have been nice. He was a bit of a prick, right? But, you know, we'll talk about that. But one thing I think we can agree on is you shouldn't run from the police. You shouldn't jump in your car and try to get away, right? Clumsy says, when she speaks, it sounds completely condescending. That's a big thing, and the jury is seeing that. They're seeing that. Mike says, you and the rest of LawTube are awesome. Thank you. $5's not much, but I'll help you buy a beer in Korea. Soju is quite cheap, guys, right? It's like $1 or $2, so it's pretty good. Jessica says she needs to win so she can feed her flying monkeys. And Edward says, brother is serving as a UK cop. The amount of shit he gets in for using his taser is unreal. Yeah, and that's just a taser, right? You keep using that word. I'm not sure. I do not think it means what you think it means. Yes, that is the quote. Thank you very much, Britt. That is the on-point quote with that particular one. And she's going to keep using reckless and use it away. D says, always run from the police. Now, what I say is always don't talk to the police. Always plead the fifth. I'll tell you that, right? I'll tell you that. And now, here's something I agree with, Cody. I don't particularly like cops either. I'm not like, you know, all blue lives matter, right? You know, it's like, well, like, look, I believe everybody's life matters. Let's take everybody's life seriously, right? But I'm not going to be out here simping for cops, particularly when I've showed video. You go to my locals, there's cops in New York dragging people out of Applebee's for not having a vaccine passport and roughing them up, right? I don't simp for those cops, right? I'm not there shilling for them, right? Let's take it individually. There are good cops. There are bad cops. People are human, right? There are good cops or bad cops. I dated a cop for one period of my life, a female cop, right? To be very clear about that, right? But yeah, it's very, very, very interesting. Why am I wearing? That's interesting. If I don't simp for him, why am I wearing blue? That's a good one. You did get me there. You did get me there. I just like the color, guys. I just like the color. All right, let's get back into this. We'll probably go, because I know Ricada is going to start. I don't want to overrun too much. Probably go for another 30, 45 minutes. So let's jump back in with the Harpy herself.
Every year for 19 years, she was trained on using her taser and using that properly. Every year she saw the PowerPoints. Every year she was told about the risk of weapon confusion.
Oh yeah, what I wanted you guys to tell me in the chat is how one's in the chat. If you guys, and I'll look back at this poll, but we're going to keep it playing, but one's in the chat. If you guys always pay attention to your training PowerPoints, right? Every corporate training PowerPoint, you always pay attention to it. 2, if you don't give a damn about the corporate PowerPoints. 3, if you don't work in corporate and you have no idea what a PowerPoint is, right? So one's if you pay attention, 2 if you don't, 3 if you're not in corporate, right? Let's continue.
Confusion, and that pulling a gun instead of a taser could kill somebody. Every year she signed the paperwork acknowledging the risks.
Oh my God, she signed the paperwork, guys. I don't know if you guys ever saw that South Park episode of the Apple, the Apple episode, or I think it was the Human Centipede, which was, it was a while back. And I don't normally watch South Park anymore, but this was a while back. And it was like, I forget it was Kyle or somebody else didn't read the terms and they couldn't get him to read the Apple terms, and they're like, we're trying to get it to read. It doesn't know how to read, Nobody reads most of these agreements. You just sign them. And in fact, from a legal standpoint, there's certain legal arguments. For example, a contract of adhesion, right? That you have to do. You have to sign an agreement in order to do something, right? You have no, there's no consideration for that contract. You could say that's a contract of adhesion. You have to do it in order to do the activity, and therefore it's invalid. That's an argument you can make. So it's almost better if you don't read it. You're just like, oh, well, they told me I had to sign this, right? I didn't have an option, right? And it's something that wasn't disclosed before. That's something that's material, right? You can argue that. But if you read it and you're like, oh, wait, let me argue this. Let me see if I can, change the terms. There might be more of an argument against it. So look, just because you sign something doesn't automatically mean that, oh, yes, every single term in it is valid. You agree to do it, and they're going to hold you to that 100%. Guys, when you go start at a corporation, you're signing paperwork, and I know this, that you've read hundreds and hundreds of pages of corporate policy and documents. I guarantee you nobody, including me, right? And I was the guy who wrote a lot of these policies, right? I guarantee you that nobody's read all those, right? Cover to cover, especially before they start. Nobody's read 200, 300 pages of corporate policy, right? Unless there's like some corporate policy Rain Man out there. Most people don't have the attention span for that, right? But you're signing that you did. It doesn't mean anything. It's worthless, right? It's literally just a way to make you feel better, way to make the corporation feel better. Be saying, oh, well, they signed the policy, they said the acknowledgement, they said they read it, they said they attended the training. Okay, that doesn't mean they actually had experience doing it.
And all that training and all that experience shows she shouldn't have done what she did. All that training and all that experience shows that she was aware of the risks associated with her weapons.
You mean the everyday risks?
She was aware of all kinds of risks.
Oh, all kinds.
The risk of incapacitating a driver behind the wheel, the risk of collateral injuries.
Well, isn't that something you factor in? I mean, if the person is a bigger risk, even if there can be a collateral injury, you take the shot because the damage the person can do when they get away, particularly in a car, is damning, right? You're in a weapon. We saw the truck massacre, the Christmas parade massacre, right? Terrorist attack, I'd even call it, right? The cars can do a ton of damage. Look at Nice, look at France. They show that cars, trucks can be deadly weapons. So don't say that there's no risk if these people get away, right? It definitely is a risk. You've got the car. It is a deadly weapon. You can drag someone, you can ram them. And like Earl Grey brings up in his closing, what if it's put in reverse? Then they can run over Kim Potter.
And the risk of drawing and firing a gun instead of a taser. And her conduct and her choices on April 11th show that she disregarded all those risks.
That's not what the standard is, but okay.
Now let's talk about what happened on April 11th and what she did. And the videos show exactly what happened and what she did.
The videos that they play frame by frame, which is dishonest and disingenuous, and frankly, I don't like it. And Earl Grey called it out, by the way. And shout out to Earl Grey for starting with that. He came out balls to the wall. He really got some old boomer Chad energy there. I was loving it. As he came out swinging, and was like, yeah, they're playing it frame by frame. Watch it back to back. Watch it full speed. And you know what's so funny? That's such a convincing argument that Franks was like, yeah, go ahead and do it, right? Even the prosecution was like, oh, go ahead and do it, right? Because he knew he called them out and called them out on their shit. Because frame by frame is not genuine. They were playing frame by frame, literally scenes that happen in a half a second, right? That's longer, right? Than that whole scene went. Disingenuous. And each frame, she's talking about a different state of mind that Kim Potter should be in. Each frame, we're talking milliseconds. Right now, I don't think that quickly, right? Nobody thinks that quickly. This woman doesn't think that quickly. In fact, she, under the same circumstance, would probably freeze for multiple seconds, if not minutes. She'd be paralyzed. She wouldn't know what to do. She'd go, hyperventilate. And meanwhile, Dante Wright, high as a kite, is crashing into people on the road, getting into accidents, riding dirty. He's got that lean in there. It's just insane.
This traffic stop on April 11th was nothing out of the ordinary.
Nothing out of the ordinary? Most people don't have drugs in the car, warrants out for their arrest, restraining orders with the woman in the car, who could have been the woman who had the restraining order, possible lien, right, in the middle, right? And they don't flee from the police. That's not routine. I'm sorry, Erin. That is not routine.
So ordinary, in fact, that the defendant told you herself she wouldn't have even stopped this car. She wouldn't have even stopped Dante Wright.
That was before she ran the tags. That was before they ran the information. Oh, sorry about that. Let's play this.
She had been alone for the air freshener and the expired tabs.
And always, by the way, the air freshener benefits them, so they always bring up the air freshener first.
She and Officer Lucky pulled this car over.
Officer Lucky was the one to make the decision, not Kim Potter. Let's be clear. Officer Lucky made the decision. And that's not an issue here. That's not a criminal decision. There's no crime that was committed there. It was a valid traffic stop. She's trying to make it sound like an invalid stop. It's not. It was a legit stop, legal stop.
And the defendant had initially observed the interaction between Officer Lucky and Dante Wright. When he first approached, she was hanging out toward the back. She told you it appeared to be a fine conversation. Officer Lucky wasn't in any distress. And then in the squad car, they learn about this ex parte order for protection and a gross misdemeanor warrant.
See, she's playing up. See, what she does is she throws an ex parte because she knows they don't understand it, but it sounds like she's minimizing it, which is what she's doing. Her tone is minimizing it. Her body language is minimizing it. He has a warrant out and a court order against him. Like, period. That's major. It doesn't matter what it is. It's still major.
And Sergeant Johnson shows up and they decide to arrest Dante Wright on that misdemeanor warrant.
As they're bound to do, right? That's their duty to do that at this point. Now they know they can't knowingly turn a blind eye to a warrant, right? They have to execute that. They can't be like, oh, go about your day, good citizen. Good to see you. No, they cannot do that. It's not permissible, right? And also there's an issue with Dante's license. They didn't bring that up, but, Erin leaves out a couple facts here, Miss Eldridge.
Dante Wright was unarmed. He had no gun. He had no weapon. And
they don't know that, by the way, and they actually have to presume he does have a gun. And as I think it was Officer Johnson said, or the other one there, who said that 2 out of 5 cars in this neighborhood will have guns in them, right? 2 out of 5 in this neighborhood. So the odds are pretty damn good that they've got a gun in the car, right? So they've got to presume that. And it's safe in a situation to presume that they are armed until you know for sure they aren't. Just because Erin knows that he wasn't armed now, Once again, this is the same ex post facto. She's arguing because now we know Dante wasn't armed. We can go back. No, you can't do that.
He posed no threat to those officers.
That's definitely not true, right? As long as you're behind the wheel of a car, you pose a threat. Now, is it a threat that justifies a shooting? No, of course. I mean, if you're just sitting behind the wheel of a car and you hand over your license and registration and they just shoot you, yeah, no, that's murder, right? Okay. If you were behind the wheel of the car, you hand over your license and registration, and as you're handing it, the cop pulls out their gun and shoots you in the face. That is murder, right? But that's not what happened here, right? Let's be very, very clear.
Now, when they approach together to arrest Dante Wright, the defendant has her hand on her gun.
She touches her holster.
Now, Sergeant Johnson.
It's not clear whether she withdraws it, but she does touch her holster, right? But that's, once again, not something that's necessarily an issue.
Does not appear to be particularly concerned at all. He puts his hand casually on the car.
Well, that's also a tactic. He's not trying to give away body language that he's concerned or dive into the car, right? Just yet. That'd be overzealous, I think, at this point.
They approach. She tells Officer Lucky, just have him step out, giving Officer Lucky direction, what to do, how to arrest the driver.
He's a trainee.
Sergeant Johnson and Officer Lucky tell Dante Wright he's under arrest. And she adds, you've got a warrant. And when she says that,
that's factual. So what is she going to try to make a factual statement into a criminal statement? Let's listen.
That's when Dante Wright pulls away.
Here you go. Erin Eldridge is insinuating that Dante Wright fleeing because he has a warrant is valid. That's what she did right there. Even with just her intonation, how she's saying that, how she's presenting that information. She's trying to say it is a valid thing to flee from police under Miss Eldridge's law, under this insanity of Erin, right? She is saying that people are allowed to flee, right? So a felon could flee. Now, this is a misdemeanor warrant, but a felon could theoretically flee, right? Under this precedent, because, if the police know I have a warrant, I can now flee. That's the law we want? Is that where we want to go with this? That's the logical extension? How if this was a pedo, right? How about if this was Rosenbaum, after he finished doing all those unspeakable things to children, right? And he's trying to get away. Is that something we want to, as a public policy, is that something we want here? Because that's what it sounds like Miss Eldridge wants.
That's when he tries to get back in the car. Now let's walk through what the videos show.
Hold on. So once again, this is
approaches. She grabs.
To be clear, this is like 3 seconds of video. So let's be very clear. This is like a few seconds. Like, it is not like a minute. This is going to take a minute to play. But they're literally sitting there at a keyboard going tap, 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 frame by frame. That is not reality. And I am strongly against this in the use in this type of use. Now, some other lawyers have called me out and said, oh, well, Andrew, you say never, but there's like 1 or 2 circumstances where it might be useful, like to get certain information, certain factual information. I'm like, okay, sure, but not to prove their state of mind. And this is what every single prosecutor, we saw it in Rittenhouse and we're seeing it here. And my issue is look, yeah, you're coming up with a situation in which frame by frame is legit, right? Like, let's say there's a detail in the background and you want to see the detail. Okay, I get it, right? But the issue is that prosecutors are using this frame by frame to prove state of mind. This is the danger. They're saying that in one frame, you have time to form this super articulate, complex opinion in a millisecond. You're not, a machine, right? This is not Terminator here, right? I mean, despite T2 being the best one, with there was the cop theme in T2. But I think that's the best Terminator, by the way, hands down. You guys can tell me if you disagree, but I think that's the best one.
Grabs Dante Wright's right arm with her right hand, uses her left hand to retrieve the piece of paper.
Oh, no, the piece of paper. Okay, we're going to see real quick. This piece of paper is like Carmen Sandiego. It's like, oh, my God, we finally found it. The piece of paper. Oh, my God, it's so guilty, the piece of paper. It's nothing. It's a piece of paper. Stop making a big deal about it, Erin.
this piece of paper, an insurance card. She takes that piece of paper into her left hand and switches it to her right.
Okay. Now he's fleeing. So at this point, he is now a fleeing criminal, right? He is fleeing. He's fleeing police, right? So at this point, Dante Wright has made the choice to flee, right? His choice. Nobody told him, Dante, to do this. Nobody told Dante, get in the car and drive away. And Dante made this decision. He said, you know what, brah? I'm running for it. He thinks he can what? Outrun police? Are you fucking kidding me right now? How high is this guy? He thinks he can get away. It's ridiculous.
Reaches for Dante Wright.
Now, I will say one thing on Lucky. He should have, restrained him better, but it is what it is. He's a rook, right? So he doesn't know how to, do that. But that's a little bit unlucky as well. Once again, not on Potter particularly, but yeah.
She approaches the driver's door from the rear before she would have any view or idea of what Sergeant Johnson is doing on the inside.
Once again, see how she's narrating this frame by frame, right? Not how the human mind works. She's given this narrative. This is not how it works. She should not be talking at all. It's just playing this.
And you can see, ladies and gentlemen, that Dante Wright had taken down that air freshener.
So what the fuck does that have to do with anything? Are they trying to say, oh, the stop is now invalid because he took it down? It's like, oh, okay. Like what? He's complying by taking down the air freshener. Like what? Like, no, they just said, hey, your air freshener's dangling. It's blocking the view. And they're like, all right, whatever. It just takes it down. It doesn't, imply anything. It's just, it is what it is.
She approaches from behind Officer Lucky. She moves around him to the left, but still behind him. Now Dante Wright gets in the car. She's still behind Officer Lucky.
Dante Wright is still fleeing.
And she even caught a glimpse of Sergeant Johnson in that frame.
But we don't know whether she caught a glimpse of Johnson because all we see is Lucky's ass right here. We see his duty belt. We didn't see shit. And she's 5'3", so she's not that tall.
She wouldn't have gotten a good look at him. She reaches.
Once again, she's talking about whether or not she did. It doesn't matter. Even if she got a look at him, it's in a split second. Like that's not enough data for the human mind. The human mind doesn't work like that.
With her left hand for Dante Wright's left hand, with that piece of paper still in her right hand. She's still behind Officer Lucky. She still doesn't have a view of what's going on in front of her. Now, after she reaches for Dante Wright, she takes that piece of paper from her right hand and switches it back to her left hand. She does this to free up her gun hand.
No, now, once again, Erin right here, what is she doing? Now, before she was stating some facts, she was like, okay, well, she's reaching, she's doing that. Okay, those are statements of what's actually happening. I don't have as big of an issue with people narrating that, but what she does right here is subtle. She says she does it to free up her gun hand. How about just free up her hand? I don't think she realizes the whole point is that she doesn't realize this is her gun side, right? In this shuffle, in this fight, right? She doesn't realize this is her gun side, right? That's why it's a mistake, right? But she's saying, oh, well, she knows she's going for a gun. So she does it so she can shoot him. I don't think so, buddy.
Her right hand. Now, 201-55 is the first time that the defendant says, I'll tase you.
Of course, they don't actually play the audio. You know why? Because that audio would stretch out several frames and it would show exactly how slow they're playing this, right? So they're not going to play the audio. But Erin will narrate it for you, but there's no audio.
Says that, and she's already decided to pull a weapon. And you can see it.
And Dante Wright has already decided to continue to not comply, right?
Come into frame at 201-56. She pulls this weapon while looking down at Dante Wright with this piece of paper in her left hand. She draws that gun. She points it. She holds it in front of her face, looking down at Dante Wright.
Once again, all these things she's saying, like draws it, points it, looks down at Dante Wright, these are all actions which she's not really having time to register because of all this scuffle and commotion. She looks down, looks intimately into his eyes and says, "You will die today because I am racist Kim Potter," right? No, this is a frame. You don't have time to do that, right? To make all of these actions. Now, of course, she doesn't actually say that, guys. But once again, it's the intonation. It's what she's suggesting here.
Pointing this loaded Glock.
Oh, it's loaded. Oh, well, police guns should all be unloaded. Once again, I got so pissed when she said this. I was fuming. If you go back and you watch the replay when I'm on stream, I'm pissed when she says this. Because to imply that police guns should be unloaded, right, instead of loaded? Are you kidding me? Is that a joke? Let's continue.
At his chest. Aiming
at his center of mass, as you're taught to shoot. Yes, that's where you should generally aim, center of mass, right?
Tracking his movements.
Once again, she's saying tracking his movements like he's a deer, right? Like she's a hunter, and it's intentional language. She's doing this intentionally, right? And in this 0.5 of a second, there's not time to track him like you're tracking a buck, right? This is just she's waving it, if anything. Right now, she's trying to wave it desperately in his position, but there's points at which if she fired right now, I can tell by the angle that she would have missed, right, at certain points. So she's just trying to keep up with it. I think that she would have missed at certain points if she'd fired exactly then, because Dante's squirming, right?
Now at 2:01:58 is the second time she says, "I'll tase you," while still pointing that gun at Dante Wright, while still tracking his movements.
Once again, the tracking the movements, the pointing, she's implicating a lot of state of mind here, which, as I said, no intent.
Now at this point, Officer Lucky has had some success in trying to remove Dante Wright from the vehicle. You can see that Dante Wright's left leg is out of the car. The defendant continues to point this gun at Dante Wright's chest. And at 2:02:00 is when she says, "Taser, taser, taser." At that point, you can see that's when Officer Lucky lets go. And Dante Wright is able to get both of his feet in the car.
So that doesn't really say anything. Like if she had not said that, then Lucky would have gotten him out. Like I don't think that's proving what she thinks is proving. And we'll take a break after she ends with this footage.
By the pedals. And at 2:02:01, while she's still saying, "Taser, taser, taser," she presses the trigger and shoots.
That's what a gun does when you pull the trigger.
She shoots Dante Wright in the chest.
Center of mass, as you're taught to shoot.
And that cartridge casing that you see is circled on the screen ejects right into Officer Lucky's face.
Once again, this was the part I got pissed off too. It's like what the fuck? Like, what do you expect? Oh my God, the deadly case. Oh my God, the Officer Lucky, he could have been killed. He could have lost an eyelash by the cartridge. Yes, I mean it could hit you in the eye, and that could cause some eye damage. But once again, it's like, come on, man. Like, this is ridiculous. Like that argument, this whole thing about the case, like right in his face. Oh my gosh, it's so dangerous. It's a situation. It's a heated scuffle. This is a heated situation, right? You don't have time to wait until they're going to be clear of the cartridge eject, right? That's not something they train them on either. Like, hey, make sure that there's no way that the cartridge could eject in your partner's face. Like, I guarantee that's not in the training, right? So to try to make a big point about it is like laughable.
It bounces off his face. You can see Officer Lucky's expression after being hit with the cartridge casing in the face as the defendant shoots Dante Wright under his arm and directly in front of his face.
So that, once again, cops have to fire in those sorts of scenarios, right? This isn't an abnormal thing. You have cops firing, around each other and near each other all the time, right? So this isn't something that in and of itself, because she fired near him. And if you thought that was a problem, file a reckless endangerment charge against, her for endangering Officer Lucky. Guess what? You didn't. That's not an issue here. It's irrelevant. But she and the prosecutors, they repeatedly are able to bring in irrelevant information, right? Because of the prosecutors. They give them the benefit of the doubt. In closing, they give them the benefit of the doubt, right? But it's irrelevant. If you thought that they were such a danger, this shot was such a danger to the Officer Lucky, the passenger, or the other officer there, Johnson, or the people passing by, file charges. File the reckless endangerment charges. You didn't, because you knew that it wouldn't meet the standard, but you're acting like it does. That's the problem.
Members of the jury, this may be one of the first frames where you can see Sergeant Johnson. This is Sergeant Johnson as he's backing out of the vehicle after the defendant has already shot Dante Wright in the chest.
Right, which she thought she was tasing him. So once again, the issue is that, the taser, there'd be a different deployment. He wasn't touching Dante Wright, so it wasn't necessarily an issue if the taser was deployed there, right? But he's now shot. He's also now moving the car. That's the other thing. The car starts moving now. This is what she's leaving out. The car's about to move after he was shot.
You see the top of his head. You don't see his face. And he's backing away after the defendant has already shot Dante Wright. She shoots him, and she reaches back into the car herself with her left hand. With that,
what should she? I mean, she's acting like she should have retreated and ran away and let him get away. He's now trying to drive a car, a deadly weapon, right? A car's a deadly weapon, to drive that around recklessly, right? I mean, and she, by the way, I don't think she realizes yet that she didn't tase him, that she shot him. I think at this point she still doesn't realize it. So, I mean, she's still in shock or whatever, but once again, this is not an improper action. The reaching in is not a charge. The whole thing, this whole case is about what has already happened. The rest of this stuff, except for the fact that, it could be seen as a superseding event here. That's kind of a legal argument. I don't think it's a winner, but, Dante getting away here, driving away. I don't think that's a winner, but once again, it's really just what's already happened that's relevant, not this.
that Glock still in her right hand.
What should she have done with it in that split second? Tossed it up in the air? Slid it over? That'd be even more reckless. Once again, it's like what do you expect? And you're making these facts, these like basic facts, sound evil, And that's the dastardliness, I love that word, of the prosecution. They will make anything sound horrible, anything, right? They'd probably make kissing babies sound bad. Well, if you're Joe Biden, it might be bad, but that's a whole nother story.
Then she puts it back in her holster. She grabs Dante Wright's left arm. And she still has that piece of paper in her left hand.
Dun, 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 the piece of paper. Like I was saying, it's like the wrench in the library with Clue. It's like, I found the murder weapon. It's the piece of paper. The piece of paper, I mean, yes, for confusion purposes, it may be relevant, but it's not helping her side. Like, I don't know why Erin thinks this is like some, golden bullet here. She's got Potter, right? Because of this piece of paper. I don't see where she's going with that. She doesn't articulate this argument.
Now, not only do you have
Okay, so that's the end of that footage, right? So what I want to ask you guys is, did you guys like that footage? I mean, did you think that footage helped her? Or do you think it hurted her or it hurt her? Right? I want to hear what you guys in the chat think about that. Like, what do you think about her playing that footage? Do you think that was convincing to the jury? Right? General Sardi says Wright was in the wrong. If he complies, he's still alive. End of story. His actions open the door for use of force. I guess once someone tries to flee the cops, it's just stand under nothing. Or at least, even if you're talking to them, like you can talk to the cops. They're not going to shoot you for talking to them, right? He could stay there and say, hey, man, don't arrest me or whatever. He could argue with them even. But the fact that he was fleeing in the car and fighting them, that's what really ended up causing this issue. If he had just been like, hey, fuck you, pigs, right? He wouldn't have been shot, right? You could have said whatever, like fuck the 5-0, right? Fine, whatever, like say that, fine, vocalize it. Be like, hey man, this isn't legit. I want to call a lawyer, blah, blah, blah. But, it's different. And by the way, this tired argument, I hate so many people libs in the chat. They're posting this shit. Oh, what if it was your brother, son, uncle? It's always different when it's your family. This is something that everybody is saying. So that's why I want to address it. Normally I would just ignore these people, but I'll address that. I'll address that because the thing is that I would feel different about it personally. Of course, everybody would. You're natural. You have a human connection to your family. Of course you do. But that doesn't change the law. And on this channel, I'm about the facts, not the feelings. Of course, as somebody's family, you're going to care no matter what. That is your family member, right? That's what, especially your mom. Your mom's going to love you unconditionally. Your genetics, right? You're 50% of her genetics. She knows that people are going to love you. Right? They're going to say, hey, this is my brother, my sister, whatever, right? The Tinder date liked him too. It was like, oh man, he could have been the one, right? The one to get me out of the gas station, right? But that doesn't change the law, right? It doesn't change the legal analysis. And this is the problem. The problem is that the left, people just like these people commenting, every person who sits there in comments, oh, if it was your family, they want us to convict people on the fact that somebody feels bad about it. They want us to find people guilty for life, to deny them their liberty because somebody feels bad. That is the death of the rule of law in this country. That is chaos. Jailing people because somebody feels bad. That is not a standard that we can follow in this country, and it's unconstitutional. Notice Lucky's head in the car when he's hit by the case, but in Frank's rebuttal, he said nobody was in the car at risk of being dragged. Yeah, Frank's literally contradicts multiple things shown in the video and multiple things said by Erin. Just straight up contradicts them, and he does it like unabashedly. He's like, oh yeah, it's a problem here. Ryan says the evil prosecutor would have happily pressed charges against KP had they let Daunte Wright flee, and Daunte Wright went on a murder spree, right? And the woman under the protection order and murdered the woman under protection order. Yeah, for sure. Would have 100% gone after her, right? Because, by the way, cops are held liable if they don't go after people, right? If they don't go after people. It's all very interesting from a law enforcement standpoint, because this is really going to cramp law enforcement, especially if there's a guilty verdict here. If there's a not guilty, I think they still should be afraid in this case. Mad says, didn't the people of Minnesota vote for this? Didn't the cops know? Why is anyone surprised or upset? Rittenhouse was different. This is government on government crime, and I'm here for it. I don't know about government on government. So I guess what you're saying is prosecutors versus police. So yeah, no, I guess what Matt, you're saying is that because they voted for this, right? Because the voters voted for this chaos is in this state. They voted for it. I guess you're true. And this is what you get. This is the ramifications of what you get when you vote for crazy people like the AG in Minnesota, right? The crazy AG, you get this result. This is what you reap, right? You reap what you sow, right? But it is still surprising, because it's still surprising to see people prosecute cops like this. And it can set precedent for the rest of the country and also for other woke areas, right? Angry Bandlinger says they went full lib, man. Never go full lib. That's so true. That's so true. It reminds me of Tropic Thunder, right? Tropic Thunder. All right. Never go full Simple Jack, guys. Never go full Simple Jack. I'll give it a couple minutes here more. We're going to run through this for another 10, 15 minutes before I let you guys out of here.
The defendant's body-worn camera, but you also have Sergeant Johnson's to review. And
Never underestimate the Johnson.
during that same time frame, let's look at what Sergeant Johnson was doing.
Oh, let's look at this. By the way, this is 0.5 seconds, guys.
He's got his feet on the
I
ground.
believe maybe, actually, no, I think this one's like 1 or 2 seconds. But anyways, it's like literally a second or two. That's it.
He approaches the passenger side of the car.
She is reading so much into these
He
milliseconds.
opens the door. Again, with his feet on the ground.
Bro, how high is this chick? This chick is high as
Puts
hell.
his left hand in at his feet, his shoulders, his hips.
And by the way, I think that this girl is shouting like, does Dante give up or Dante go with them or whatever, you know? Like she's shouting that. So she's even saying, yo, Dante, she knows it's unreasonable, right? When you play the video, you know, and I forget the exact wording, but she's pretty much saying, hey, stop fighting them. Go with them, right? Stop, right? Chill, brah. Like she's saying that. So it just makes what Dante did more manifestly unreasonable. And yes, that is material here.
Body outside the car, his feet planted firmly on the ground. He reaches over Elena Albrecht Payton, pushes on the shifter so that Dante Wright can't go anywhere. Sergeant Johnson was clearly not afraid of being dragged. He never said
While he had his hand on
scared.
the shifter.
He didn't say it then, and he didn't testify to it in court. He puts his hand on Dante Wright. And is able to pull Dante Wright's right arm all the way across the passenger side of the car, where he is, outside, almost outside.
No, not
Across
outside.
the passenger side.
Not outside. Not outside. It wasn't outside. It's completely inside of the car. His hand is not outside the car. Look at that. There's a glove box. It's not past the glove box. Once again, this is the exaggeration, the narrative that just is bullshit. But here's the thing. The jury can see that, and they can see this as bullshit, and it loses credibility when you lie like that. You just lie in their face. Like, oh, his arm is outside the car. He's not fucking go-go gadget here, right? This isn't like Mr. Fantastic, you know? Like, this is like, look at his arm's right, just barely past the shifter. And at any point can jump back and get on the shifter. In fact, right now, it's even in a more precarious position to jump on that shifter, which it eventually does.
He had, at this point, successfully prevented Dante Wright from driving the car.
Like I said, you can drive with one hand. Like I've driven with one hand. You can drive with one hand, right? You know, so I don't know what she's talking about. Preventing him, right? He can use the other arm to shift and then back on the wheel, or you don't even need to have a hand on the wheel. You're just going to hit the gas with your foot, right? So yes, Dante Wright was still capable of driving. The keys are in the car. The car's running.
And he had done that successfully up until the point where the defendant shot him.
Shot him.
He was clearly not worried about it at all.
He backed up after the gunshot. So, I mean, yeah.
And he didn't even remember the line that the defendant fed him.
Fed him. I don't know what the fuck that means. Didn't feed him shit. Like that's so ridiculous. And trying to discredit the cops after they're your witnesses, it's slimy.
So it clearly was not so significant to him. But after the defendant shoots
Also, once again, reading state of mind into him at the time, which frankly, he was probably not thinking that in that quick of a time.
her gun. And after Sergeant Johnson had chosen to engage and chosen to disengage, he stands up, he steps back,
Car's rolling
and he shuts the door.
because the car is in motion. And a open door is dangerous on a car in motion.
Behind him.
Okay, so yeah, that's the ridiculousness of that one. Okay, we'll give it a little. Well, I'll go in the first charge, but then we'll pump back.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the jury, Sergeant Johnson had the time and the forethought.
No forethought. I mean, here's my issue: is she using the word forethought? Right? Maybe time. Okay, we can argue whether or not somebody has enough time, but forethought. Something that happens in a split second, or even if it's 5 seconds, there's no forethought. That's like she's reading in this premeditation. Only in your wildest, crazy live fantasy, when you're going frame by frame, can you read in forethought.
To protect Elena Albrecht Payton from what the defendant had just done.
That's not shown at all by the evidence. No evidence shows that officer was protecting her. That's what? It was protecting her, by the way. Closing the door is protecting her from what Dante Wright was doing, which was driving away and fleeing the scene, being a fleeing criminal, right? Because he is actively fleeing at this point. You know, despite being shot, he's fleeing. So if anything, it's protecting him from what Dante Wright is doing, the superseding event. Now, you don't want to talk about that now, Erin, do you?
She shot a driver and sent an unguided hazard down the road.
Once again, she did not shoot him while he was driving. He was not driving at that point. We've established that. You established that, Erin. Sent an unguided thing down the road. What? Dante wasn't dead yet. He was the one who chose to keep driving when he did that. He made that decision. He put himself on that road, right?
The defendant didn't save Sergeant Johnson's life. Both Elena Albrecht Payton.
That doesn't matter whether, once again, Erin keeps arguing reality. It's subjective perception that is the standard. It's not about whether or not something did or didn't happen, whether or not Johnson, was dragged or not. And what this would set a precedent for is that officers would actually have to be dragged for that to be justified.
And Sergeant Johnson were in the line of fire. If anyone saved Sergeant Johnson's life, it was Dante Wright.
This was appalling. This was disgusting argument. You're making a fleeing felon into a criminal. I'm sorry, fleeing, no, the felon, but this is a warrant, right? A fleeing criminal, right? A hero. This is like making Rosenbaum a hero. The thing Binger tried to do, saying Binger, Binger was saying that Rosenbaum, Huber, and Grosskreutz were heroes, right? Were heroes. Disgusting. This is a criminal. A person with a restraining order, a warrant, a person who is high, right? This is not a hero. It's not a person who actively saved anybody. Dante Wright did not dive in front of that bullet and take it to save anybody. I'm going to save you, officer. Took the bullet. No, right? It was a mistake, but Dante Wright didn't take that for the team, right? As Krause would say, he didn't just take the licks, right? No, that wasn't what happened, right? I'm sure that Dante Wright, in fact, based on the fact that he wasn't really looking at the gun, he wouldn't have his eyes open for a period of time. It looked like his eyes were closed or he was glazed over. Definitely glassed, probably. He did not intend to take that bullet. We can read that into it. No matter what was happening, Dante Wright did not intend to take the bullet or taser, right? He wouldn't have intended to take either. He probably thought he was going to get away scot-free, right? Oh, if I speed away, I'll be fine, right?
He took a bullet to the chest.
Once again, did not take it for anybody. He was shot in the center of mass, according to training.
And you saw Officer Lucky. He was so close that cartridge casing bounced off his face.
Not a charge or a crime.
That's how close he was. Members of the jury, safe handling of a firearm does not include firing it into a car with 4 people directly in harm's way.
It can if the prevention, it's a balancing act, right? You can fire into, plenty of cops fire into cars because the car getting away is more of a danger than them firing into the car, right? Cops have fired into cars with passengers all the time, right? Innocent passengers. Right? Because they feel the balance is there. Now, look, we can argue whether that's justifiable or not. That's a good argument, right? But that's the principle, and that principle is in the law. Now, we can argue that as a principle, right? But that's not what she's doing here.
In addition to all the other people at risk on that public street, including the Lundgrens, who just happened to be driving by.
Once again, this is not a charge. This is why I think it's like objection relevance, right? there's no charge against the Lundgrens. There's no reckless endangerment charge. You should not be able to say a danger to everybody. That's factually incorrect based on the charges. You haven't charged them. You can't say it's a danger to them because you haven't charged that. If it was, you should charge it. Oh, you didn't? Because you know you would lose on that? They get tossed out? That's a trash charge? Yeah.
When it comes to risk, every single traffic stop where an officer pulls over a car and approaches comes with some risk. There's always risk that a driver could take off. Every time an officer reaches into a car or into a window to take a license or hand over a ticket, there's some risk that the driver could take off or flee. There's some risk.
She's minimizing now, by the way. It's a minimizing strategy.
Of being hit by the car, but that doesn't make it an actual threat. It doesn't mean that
That's not the, see, once again, she's strawmanning the argument because that's not the situation here. That's not the facts, right? The fact is you had 2 officers in the car. You had another person that could have been the person with the restraining order out. She could have been kidnapped for all we know, right? And he was speeding off to evade. He was speeding off to evade this, to evade this warrant, right? I mean, that's not the factual scenario she's talking about here. She's used this false equivalency, and this is something prosecutors do so much. And I'll minimize this here for a second because I want to talk about this. But this is something that prosecutors do very often. They minimize, right? They minimize that, and they make these false equivalencies, right? They make these false equivalencies.